things so that they're a little bit bigger. Aloha. Okay, last verse. Kau kau iamai. So we have, you just finish, u ta, and you give away, kau kau iamai e te aloha. You have a fist and a fist, and then delightful with hellas, but double time your arms, out and in. Now we're going to call with our left and give away, and then listen with your right and bring it into your heart. Put your pinky fingers behind your ears for your nematode. 1, 2, and then you switch lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Up, touch, and then you go right into it again. Kau kau iamai e te aloha. Arm, delightful. And listen, call and listen. And I am a lizard. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Up, down, give away. Yeah, we do that 4 times. Does that make sense, Janessa? Yes. Okay, questions about any of the other parts? Should we just give it a shot? Okay, so first verse is about the sun. Second verse is about food. Third verse is about walls. Fourth verse is about houses. And then we have, you're the worst nematode ever. Okay. Oh boy, please don't rely on just me. We'll see how we do. Ay, ay, ay. Almost. Oh, it's a walrus. Dinah got out! Dinah got out. She's out front. She's in the neighbor's yard on the left. She's in Lynn's yard. Okay, how'd you do?
Dinah's just trying to go into other people's houses.
Dinah just left our house.
I guess she's tied to something in the pod. What the fuck?
I don't know, Janessa. You have to unmute yourself if you're talking to me.
Not really. I was just thinking of when I messed up so I could review it later.
I just screw up the wall verse every time. Bounce, bounce, bounce. That's the bounce verse. And then it's, yeah, ka'o. 1, switch lines. Pull up. Le uehe. I know it if I don't dance it to music. How about you guys? Do you know what you messed up? Are you actually going to rehearse though when we have our week off? Bunch of liars. You're all just liars. Lie to my face. Lie to my screen. You lied to my orange butt. Okay. Malama? You guys okay with just jump into Malama? Or Nematoda again? Okay, again. Hopefully they were watching that. Okay, Nina, give notes.
Third verse is no ka'os, ulili, shake, bounce, 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 bounce.
You mean uehe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That.
Shimmy, bounce, 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 bounce.
And then in that verse, Ari, at the end for the poniu and the make sure your elbows don't get too close to your body. You're kind of turning it here, so just kind of away, small kind. Just make sure that the look is sharp. That's it. That's what I got. Because I can only look at one square at a time. And then I forget to look at Janessa and Lindsay because they're on a different row. Janessa says that's okay.
You guys shouldn't be looking at me, Nina, at all. Even though you laughed at me when I was just like doing koholos back and forth.
I mean, what are they going to look at me for? I'm just sitting here.
Okay, Malama. If you have no questions, do you have no questions? We're okay? Okay. It's very weird to do it facing this way. Homa kako? Jesus. Kamakani. Heya. Manu e. Manu e. Mauna. Manu e hanaho. Ho'olono hanaho. E kahi. Give notes.
This is more question than note because I don't know the answer. End of the first verse, put, do the arm and hip switch directions? So is it put right arm in front,
Yeah.
akau, and then left
And then
arm
hama.
in front, hama? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
second verse. Make sure that these arms don't end up here.
She means this.
Yeah.
So bend the elbows, guys, and soften.
Yeah.
So it's still like a bird and not aeroplane.
Airplane.
Yeah. So stop too low, Ari. Don't let it drop that low. Yeah. So it shouldn't feel like it's that much work because it's just there. So you're still at your hip height. Yeah. Beautiful.
There was one more thing. Mountain. The is Uliri Uehe.
Oh.
Kao.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. If you're following me. I was so committed too.
You were. That's it.
Okay. Any questions? Cool. So when we get to Lake Texas, our rehearsals are Saturday again, and we're going to start with Kawaimukiki. And then have a plan of all the pieces. So we'll have a nice strong outline of this is what we need to accomplish. Yeah. So that way we're not in this kind of what's happening realm, which I don't care for, but Move and Miss Tracy assured me, she's like, it's okay. It's just a couple weeks. Everybody's cool with it. Calm down. Okay. So now we're going to listen to Lindsay tell us these really fun stories. I'm sweating. So Janessa, if while Lindsay's telling these stories...
Okay, well, my dogs would choose now to bark.
Okay.
They've been silent the whole time. Anyway, so the first one, I'm going to start with the one about the shark man.
Just a sec. Because I want...
This one...
Janessa, I want you to listen to these stories.
That might be on my end. I might have to rejoin.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay.
So just a sec. Janessa, you can hear me? Okay. So Janessa, I want you to listen to these stories and think of it from an editing point of view.
I cannot hear you.
Sorry, now I cough in. That's so rude. Thinking about editing and also a couple of board members, we talked about getting green screens or green paper for everyone so that we can green screen everybody's backgrounds to put the same backdrop on everyone. And then Nina has a friend that is going to walk her through some technology on how to put everybody on the same screen with the same background. So Nina's going to ask her friend because she just saw a really terrible show.
It's not a good show.
But the technology was cool. And I was like, how did they do that? Because it looks like all the actors are actually in the same space with a green screen.
There was also one scene where they were doing a little dance or something and it was two of them, but there was like a live filter put on it where, so it was the two of them, but with the filter, it like multiplied them like live. So it looked like there were like six of them. It was wild. Not a good show, but a wild time technically.
So Janessa, we know you can handle it. Cool.
I can hear you now. It was still connected to my TV, so okay. So I'm gonna start with the Sharkman story. Basically, it starts with the goodness gracious. So it starts with the king shark of Hawaii, named Kamohoali'i. He had the ability, of course, to turn into a shark, but he also had a human form. And in his human form, as all of these stories go, he was a very handsome man. So one day he was walking along the beach, and this very beautiful girl named Umi was down by the shore collecting her favorite food, shellfish. And typically she would go with a group of other girls. But on days when the ocean would be a little too rough, the other girls would just kind of be like, nah, that's risky. I don't really want to go. So she'd be like, okay, screw you. I'm going to go get my shellfish by myself. So he saw her. I believe he saw her with her friends first, and then he wanted to come back and wait for her to be by herself. So when she finally was, she went into the rough ocean. Not a very smart decision on her part. And she nearly drowned. She got caught in the waves and she was just struggling. She was normally, I think, a pretty good swimmer, but this was just a particularly bad day for the ocean. So lucky for her, Kamahuali'i was nearby and he came in and he saved her. And from then on, they kind of had frequent meetings and they became acquaintances, and then they fell in love, of course. And they got married. And she was still unaware of his true nature until she became pregnant and it was time for her to give birth to their son. And he decided that then he was going to tell her of his true nature because he was like, oh, this is going to get passed down to my son, so I should probably warn her so she's not freaked out. So he told her that he had to leave, but he warned her very strictly and clearly to not to give him any kind of animal meat or flesh of any kind. So, of course, the grandfather was like, well, I want a strong warrior grandson. So he went against this rule and he fed the boy animal meat because he wanted him to grow strong. Now the boy had to, his name was, oh God, Nanoe. He had a shark mouth on his back because of his father, of course. And he had to keep a cloth across his shoulders to hide the shark mouth because that's not normal. So he had to stay isolated from other people for the most part. And of course, in this time, it wasn't really normal to cover yourself very much. Everybody was just like, free with their bodies. So they were like, kind of weird that this kid just doesn't engage in activities and never takes off this cloth, but oh well. So near near their house, there was a pond, and he would always go into the water as he was growing up, and he would chase around the fish in his shark form, while his mother would stand by and watch, holding his cloth for him. And then when he'd get out, she'd put it back on him. And when he got older and he was able to understand the severity of why it's important for him to keep the cloth on, he was careful and sure to always keep it on him. But thanks to his grandfather, his appetite, the more he grew, the more his appetite grew. And eventually, once he became a grown man, it was too strong and it wasn't a normal human diet wasn't going to suffice. So he couldn't really rely on his grandfather and his uncles to give him enough food. So he, like I said, he wouldn't really do anything. His main activities were fishing and relaxing in his house, but most of the time he'd be seen working in his mother's potato garden. And around the time that he was old enough to begin working there, and his appetite was growing, people started to disappear. So they would get killed by shark attacks. And there was just kind of a trend that was getting noticed that the people who would go to the ocean to swim or fish or whatever they were going to do, they had to pass by his mother's potato patch where he was always working. And anytime he would see people, he would give them this fake warning about being careful of going swimming by the ocean because there's disappearances happening and they don't want to get attacked by a shark. And the people that he would warn were always the people that would get attacked. So no one really suspected him at first. He was a pretty nice guy from what people knew, so they were just kind of like, it's fine. So one day, the king of Hawaii at the time announced to the people on the island that they were going to, everyone was going to be put to work on plantations for him. But Nanoe was just kind of like, no, I don't think I will. So the order was that every man, woman, child, even elderly, as long as they were capable, like everyone physically capable of labor was going to be going. So when it came time for them, everyone to go to work, they noticed that Nanoe wasn't going with them. So they reported it to the king. And he was, of course, brought to the king. And when the king asked him why he wasn't doing his work, because he's obviously perfectly capable, he just responded and he said, I didn't think I had to. So the king was actually kind of amused by his audacity, I guess. So he was like kind of thinking he'd make a great warrior. He's bold. But he said, well, you got to go to work on plantation because it's what I ordered. So he went to work. And of course, during hard labor, it's even more unusual to keep clothing on you. So everyone grew really suspicious as the day went on, and he kept the cloth around his shoulders. So a group of people went up to him and they took the cloth off. And to their surprise, there was a giant shark mouth on his back. So he was furious and he started to attack the people. And he just went around and he had very shark-like behavior himself, and he was just on a rampage. So of course, word spread quickly and the king was alerted, and he sent an order for him to be captured and put to death, burned alive, I believe. So the people went to go capture this being, and when they found him, he started to run, and he kept running away, and they kept getting just close enough to catch him, but he'd always get out of their grasp. And so the king heard the people complaining about how they wanted the people they wanted his family to get killed because they should be held responsible for raising such a terrible person, obviously. But the king, he was a pretty good guy. So he was like, well, we should probably hear out the story before we go and just executing a whole family. So they brought forth Nanoe's mother and his uncles and grandfather. And when his mother explained the story, the king was forgiving, and he told the people that they were to be left alone and that they weren't going to be held responsible for anything. So instead, they held a ritual to have the shark god, Nanoe's father, speak through one of the mediums in his shark cult. So when he did, he expressed his grief to the people and just apologized for the terror that his son has caused, and said that it was never his intention and that he did warn the family, but it is the grandfather's fault for feeding him animal meat. So he said that his son wasn't going to be executed. Instead, he just banished him from Hawaii, and said that if anyone were to find him on the island, they were to kill him instantly. So of course, Nanaue heard of this order and he left and found another island where people sort of heard the myth about this half man, half shark guy, but they weren't really concerned. And he found this beautiful woman, married her, and they were doing good for a little while. They did sleep in separate tents because he wanted to sleep without his cloth, so he didn't want her to see his shark back. But eventually, his old habits came back, and he started to lure people to the sea, push them over, devour them, gruesome stuff. And one day he was seen pushing a girl into the sea, and people were like, oh my God, the myth is true. It's him. I cannot believe that we let him charm us into false security. So they tried to capture him, but he ran and he left and he went to Molokai, where he was not known at all. So again, kind of repeated. He was good for a little while, and he just kind of kept to himself a little bit, but made sure that he was coming off as a nice guy. And he made sure this time to go into a more secluded area when he would want to kill somebody. And when the people would start to search, he'd make sure that he was always found in an area far away from the attack, looking like he's been fishing the whole time or whatever. So finally, it became really bad because there were so many attacks and the people were really terrified of going near the water. So obviously that's a huge problem because they can't fish, so they can't get food. So they were like, okay, that's enough. So they went to a shark kahuna, and he told them that if they go to Nanaue's home, and they had a couple people pass by him on their way to the ocean, they had to have a group of people waiting by to hear when he'd give that fake warning. And when he did, they should go and ambush him, capture him, kill him. So they did that, but once they captured him, he got away because he does that. So they chased him all the way down to the shore, and eventually he was overpowered, tied up very tightly, and they thought that they were good, so they all went to go get materials to start a huge fire to burn him. But he was smart, so he rolled down to the water, and he was able to put his feet in the water and turn into a shark form. But the binds did stay on, so they were very tight because in his shark form he is much bigger. So they were kind of cutting into his skin, and the wounds from the people attacking him were cutting into him. So when they realized that he had gone back into a shark form, they charged into the water, and everyone just started using anything they could, from rocks, spears, whatever, to try and get him wounded enough to make him stop fighting back. And thanks to all of these wounds and the great amount of blood loss, the demigod Una was able to overpower him, and he ordered the people to use the ropes to drag him up to the hill slopes, and they would burn him alive there. So a shallow ravine was created from his giant form on the land, and they tried to burn him alive, but since he was so giant and he was just losing so much blood and water was coming out of him that it would put the fire out every time. So Una was like, okay, you know what? I'm sick of this. So he ordered the people to go to the grove with bamboo. It was sacred bamboo, but he was like, oh well. So he ordered the people to cut it and shape it into knives so that they could cut up the shark flesh and burn it. So they did, and obviously he died. But Una's father was furious because of the misuse of his sacred bamboo and the damage done to the land. So he took away the edge and sharpness to that specific bamboo in that grove, and to this day, the bamboo in that grove is not even sharp enough to cut more than just a common piece of wood. And that concludes the first story about Nanoy the Shark Man.
What is everybody's thoughts on that? How many times can one person shark get away?
Right? Just kept escaping.
Yeah, I'm excited. It'll be fun to try to make this story happen. Me and I
Yeah.
talk about like where the shark mouth is going to be on his back, and like, but you guys get to play all the other characters.
Yay.
Moms, the wives, the people working that are like, why aren't you working?
I'm excited to see how it turns out. It's a good story.
Does anyone also have puppeting experience? Janessa?
I only have what we did that one time in acting class.
Oh, so I'm going to count that as a yes.
Okay.
Good. Oops. Let's hear the second story. This one is like a melodrama. Like
Yes, it is.
almost
It
goes on.
Yeah, very dramatic. um, so it starts with just kind of setting up the scene. On the southwest coast of Lanai, there is a ravine with old ruins of a heiau. And inland from that, there is where people used to live, a little village. And it was really well known for fishing grounds, so it attracted people from all around to go fishing there. But the ravine, when it branched out onto the beach, it created a bluff-bound beach, and one of the walls became eroded over time from nature, so the wall is way too high for any man or goat to even attempt to climb. And the water is really rough there. It's just like springs of water and lots of mist. So it's an intense area. So now the story begins with where King Kamehameha became attracted to that fishing ground, and he and his people moved there, and they were welcomed by the men with tributes and offerings, and the women had leis of their jessamine flowers, and they're known for their very lovely scent. And they were just decorated from head to toe with the beautiful leis of these flowers. Um, and they presented King Kamehameha with one over his brow, and his warriors with leis over their necks. So one warrior in particular, he noticed a girl who was dancing for King Kamehameha, and she was particularly beautiful. She had very sweet, bright skin. She was just like glowing in the light, and she was just stunning, and he instantly fell for her. Of course. So he asked King Kamehameha if he could marry her. And in exchange for his permission to marry this beautiful young woman, he would allow King Kamehameha to keep the valley that he was going to give him to plant the jessamine flowers in. But King Kamehameha told the warrior, whose name is Kaili'i, that he was going to keep the valley and plant the flowers as he was instructed, but the young woman is already betrothed to another warrior, who's a very scary warrior in particular. Everyone kind of fears him because he is just known as like a bone crusher and he just brutal man, terrifying. And he's known for his very poor treatment of women in particular. So, of course, Kala, the young woman, was terrified of him and absolutely did not want anything to do with him. And she also fell in love with Kaili'i, so she was like, "No, I want to marry him." So King Kamehameha said that the two men were to wrestle each other for to win Kala. And a long fight went on, and in the end, of course, Kaili'i prevailed and he killed the other man. So there was a celebration after for his victory, and the women were dancing, hula, and just having a grand old time. And Kaili'i is a jealous man, so he saw the other men looking at the women dancing and looking at Kala in particular, and he became very upset and he became very jealous. And he said to her that he was going to take her into his hut and she was to dance only for him alone forever. Um, so he took her into his hut, and her father, Opunui, he was like, "Oh my God, I have no more daughter. Who's going to take care of me?" Um, and to top things off, the man that I absolutely despise is her husband. So he came up with a plan, and his plan was to take her into the underwater caves that he has, and keep her there until Kaili'i died or left, just until he was gone, so that she wouldn't be married to him. And he went to them in their hut and he told her that her mother had fallen very ill and that she needed to come see her immediately. So the two had a very long and dragged out goodbye, very tearful, dramatic. And they agreed to, or Kaili'i agreed to let Kala go with her father, because he was like, well, I love my mom too, so I wouldn't really want anyone keeping me from going to see her if she's dying. But he did tell Opunui that if he didn't return her to him after a few days, he would kill Opunui and then he himself would die. So Kala left with Opunui, and along the journey, he became very frustrated with his daughter because she would not stop crying. So he was like, "Oh my God, will you shut up?" And then she kind of stopped to look around and she realized that they're not going in the direction they should be going to get to their mother. So she asked her father about it, and he was just like, "Oh, she's just waiting by the shore for you. She has a dried squid prepared for you." So she was like, "Okay." And she went with it and they went down to the shore. And when she realized that her mother was most definitely not down there, um she saw that there was a shark in the water and she was like, "Oh no, really?" So she started freaking out and she was like, you can't like make me stay here. You can't force me away from my husband. I want to go back." And obviously he was like, "Absolutely not." So he said that her only choice is to either go with him into his underwater cave as a shark for her mate who wouldn't harm her, and she would just stay there until Kaili'i was gone. Um, that was really her only choice, I think. So, so she was obviously trying to refuse, but he wasn't having any of it. So he dragged her down into his underwater cave, and when he put her there, she realized that there was this giant snake, this eel, that was most certainly going to harm her. So she started freaking out again. And Opunui was like, "Okay, fine, I'll give you a choice. Either you stay in here and do as I told you, or I take you to the nearby chief and we let Kaili'i see you with another man." So she refused because she was like, "No, I only love Kaili'i. I will not give my love to anybody else." So he was like, "Okay, have it your way. By the way, don't even try to escape because one, you're too weak to get back up to the ocean, and there are crabs down here. They will try and eat you alive. And of course there's the giant eel, so that's fun." Um so he left her, and going back to Kaili'i, it's been a few days. Um and he's waiting for her. Nothing's happening. And then he sees a figure of a beautiful young woman who looks remarkably similar to Kala. And when he gets very excited because he's like, "Oh my God, she's back! Yay! I don't have to die now." Um, so when the figure gets closer, he realizes that it's not his wife. It's her best friend, Ua, whose name means rain. And she's just very similar in appearance and mannerism to Kala. But she came with very sad news. She told Kaili'i that some men in a nearby village had seen Opunui taking her through the forest, which was not the way that they would go to get to her mother. And they haven't reached her mother. They haven't been seen since they went into the forest. So Kaili'i, he's not a dumb person, so he figured out what Opunui did. And he took off running, found Opunui, and they were in a very intense and long chase. But Opunui was able to keep a good distance away from him. But eventually Kaili'i started to catch up. So Opunui headed for sacred ground, Tabu, and went to go climb the wall. And just as he was about to climb the wall, Kaili'i had got a hold of his neck. But because they'd both been running for so long, they were sweaty, so he lost his grip on him. Opunui climbed the wall, and the priests shooed Kaili'i away. So he decided that he was going to give up on his quest to kill Opunui for now, and instead he was going to find Kala. So he starts going all across the island, searching for her, and a couple times during his journey he gets injured and he has to go back home. And Ua is one of the women who tends to him, and she ends up falling in love with him as well. So um so she ends up leaving with him without him knowing, when he goes back to continue his search for Kala. And she follows him during the rest of his journey, just keeping a distance away so that he doesn't know, but keeping close enough so that she can keep an eye on him. And eventually he reaches the bluff-bound beach that I had started this story with. And he climbs up to the top, and he's looking down at the rough waters below, and he's calling out for Kala. And for a second, he thinks that he can hear her calling back, but then he realizes that he's just being too hopeful and he's hearing things. So he's about to turn and leave when he sees a figure spring up out of the water, and he recognizes her for a very brief second. So he runs down to the water, and he's kind of hesitating because he's like, this is really dangerous water and I don't really know if I want to go down here. But he's like, you know what? Do it for true love. So he dives in, and Ua is watching from a distance. And of course, she doesn't really know what he's doing. She doesn't really know that he's figured out that Opunui probably has her in a underwater cave. So she's like, oh my god, he killed himself. So she runs back to King Kamehameha and tells him of the tragedy. And he's obviously very upset because he was one of his best warriors. So he decides that he wants to go looking for him to see if he truly is dead. So Ua goes to get her brother and tells him to get his canoe and take her out to sea. And King Kamehameha figures out that, he asks a priest. And he tells him that Opunui's got these underwater caves, and that's probably where she is. So they go out in the canoes and they find the underwater cave, but they don't get there in time because when Kaili'i went down into the cave, he at first didn't find anybody, but then he heard somebody crying. So he went deeper into the cave to investigate, and he found a very, very wounded Kala. She was just bleeding all over the place and like hanging. So he ran over to her, and she knew she was going to die. So she asked him not to kill her father and to lay her among the jessamine flowers. So he was holding on to hope, and he was like, no, you're not going to die. I'm going to help you. I'm going to get you out of here. But there really was no way to save her because he didn't have medical help with him. So what could he do? So she died in his arms. And Ua and King Kamehameha eventually arrived to see a very grief-stricken Kaili'i holding his love. And Ua runs over because they were still best friends. So she's obviously just lost her best friend. She's very sad. And King Kamehameha pulls Kaili'i aside and he's trying to convince him that he can have so much more. He can marry Ua because she's so similar to Kala. And he can be a young chief, he can be a great man, he can have all this stuff, and he'll give it to him. But Kylie isn't convinced, and he says that he can't live any longer if Kala is no longer alive. So he takes a rock and he bashes himself in the head with it, and he dies. So poor Ua, she just lost her love and her best friend in like a span of 2 minutes. So she is very upset, rightfully so. And she sings a song for the two loved ones. And King Kamehameha orders that they'll be wrapped in cloth and they can lay on a ledge in the cave next to each other so they can forever be together. And when they leave, they do exactly that. They get some bamboo to carry them, and they put them on the ledge by the cliff. And people gathered on the bay to sing songs for them and to grieve their loss. And yeah, that's the end of the story. Talk about Romeo and Juliet. So very
Wait.
dramatic.
Ua doesn't commit suicide at the end?
I don't think so.
No, I thought she did.
I thought she did too. I thought it might have been another story. I really thought she did. But
I
no.
was like, this is a story where everybody dies.
Right? But I don't know. It didn't say. So, yep. Very dramatic story.
Yes. Yes.
But a good one.
So we need a Kala, a Ua, a Kaili'i, Kamehameha, and Opunui.
Yes.
Opunui, is that his name? Opu?
Opunui, yeah.
And
Yeah.
then there's this random, right, when they're fighting, the like big guy and he like
Oh
kills
yeah, the scary warrior.
scary warrior.
Yep.
So there's also the like, oh, there's a party because you killed the scary warrior. So there's that.
Mhm. Yep. There's the priest that he gets the answers from. So many people.
There's a priest. There's
Yep.
just a ton of people in the story. And then there's also the Song of Ua,
Mm-hmm.
the love song of Ua for the two bodies that Kamehameha is like, oh, we'll let them die here together and be forever here. And I'm like, he's just lazy and doesn't want to bury him.
Right? He's like, nah, I don't really feel like carrying bodies up.
Yeah.
It's fine.
But
Leave them there. It's okay.
Good idea. Yeah. So what do we think of that story? It's sad.
Yeah,
It's just melodramatic.
very.
And like there's just a lot going on. Like she cries for half of the story.
Oh god, she does. She really does. I think the only time she's not crying is the very beginning when they're celebrating, and then from then on it's just tears.
Kala just cries the whole rest.
Yep. Pretty much.
So I think in that story, Ari is gonna play Kala. So
Ooh.
yeah, and then Emma's gonna play Ua.
Ooh. Ari.
I think that's how we're gonna do that story. And then we have the story of the underworld, where the boy steals from the altar, Kane and Kanaloa's altar, and then they're like, "You dead, pooh," and he's dead. And then Dad's like, "Where's my son? Oh my God, he's dead." And he's like, "I'm not gonna eat anymore. Feed the altar." And Kane and Kanaloa are like, "This sucks. Okay, you can go to the underworld and go get him. Here's a magic stick. And we'll put tons of magic in it." And he sits in a bright grapefruit tree with like dead people like waiting, and then it goes and he's in the underworld, and then he has to like battle people in the underworld and light the whole underworld on fire, and then he saves his son who's choking on a banana eternally. And then he takes his son and stuffs him into the stick. Janice is like, I know this story. And then goes back up and he's like, and out of the stick and in through the feet. You're alive. The end. So that's like the shortest version of that story, but it's still a really cool story. We do need a old Pele story where she goes asking people for help. And the first house is like, yes, we'll give you what we have. And the second house is like, no, we're stingy. Get out of here. And then she's like, and boom, lava. And then we'll do like the lesson of the story is, and then we'll do the song grand. So like, lesson of the story is
Lava.
No. Love old people. Be kind to everybody. Blip, blip, blip. And then I do want to figure out a demon dog story. And I think I want to use shadow puppetry for that somehow. With like glowing red eyes through parchment paper. Yeah. So we have to create a video that then we give to Janessa, and you guys all dance in front of a green screen, which is with that video. So you're actually dancing with the pre-made video of the demon dogs in the shadow behind you. Yeah.
That's gonna be so cool.
Yeah. And I was also thinking some of the puppets, like in the shark one, because he like, I think he doesn't in the shark one he sing or something at the top of a mountain at one point. He's like, no.
I don't think so. I don't remember singing. I don't think so.
Okay.
Maybe he did. I don't know.
So I was thinking like we could also create him with arms so that we can do the hula hands on the puppet. And you can be the head and I'd be the hula hands where the puppet dances hula. Yes. So the weird sound is over here. Janessa, I don't know if you're like, what was that sound? It's over here. No, she's fine.
No, my audio keeps cutting in and out and I can't hear anything.
And then we still need a story of Night Marchers. So Night Marchers, you guys would just be in red light. It'll just be super dark. You'll be just scary, and we'll add a smoke effect to all of the footage, just layer on top. But you'll all be dancing in the dark, just like red light. And we also need a Menehune number and an Obake number. So we have a lot to do, but you know me, I want to do a full-length show. So all the scary doodads I can think of. Now the demon dog story is a contemporary story. So you're actually dressed in more like everyday clothes, like a tank top and shorts, because it's a contemporary one. And you go out and you're like, what's that in the dark? It's a demon dog that transforms into a bigger demon dog. Yeah. Bark, bark, bark. Super exciting. I think those are all the stories so far that we're doing. And I think that's a chunk, like that's a lot. Plus we have the snow goddess, all the mo'o stuff. So you guys have to learn mo'o. And then we have Kawaii Mukiki, another like travel to the underworld. So that's a full-length show. Janice is like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a show. We're working on a full show. So, yes. Then we'll figure out rehearsal schedule. So exciting. And then some pieces I think I am going to give to the hula class. Where it's like, dance this pretty piece. Like maybe the, oh, we're really happy number in the middle of that crazy story. I was like, we could do Ka'ulu Hioki Kai where it's about seaweed.
Mm-hmm.
It's so happy. We're like, hey ho oh he no kei aku. Let's get seaweeded today. Yes. Okie dokie. So I'm not going to see you guys until the 3rd. I'll see you in the morning of the 3rd. Yes. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Awesome. Okay, and I recorded all of this last part so that Miss Tracy can see the stories. And if you have to go back and like, who are all these people? It's going to be on the same video as the Nematoda. And I guess Malama is, I didn't hit stop. So I guess Malama's also on here. And I'm probably cursing while I'm dancing it. So I'm going to stop.